Guys, today we're kicking off a brand new series called The God Who Seeks today. Excited about this one. A lot of times, many of us, I didn't grow up in church, but I know a bunch of us did grow up in church. And so a lot of times what happens when we think about God, because he's a God who is just, and he's a God who he holds eternity in our hands, there's a sense of sometimes dread in approaching God. And there's a sense of maybe God is kind of permanently mad at me or frustrated with me or distant from me. Maybe I have cares that he's too busy to handle. I don't know how I kind of feel about God or where I stand with him. And what we want to do in the course of this series is kind of walk through, and we want to just look at a bunch of different interactions where we watch how God interacts with people, and where we, in fact, see that God is a God who seeks. He's actually a God who's not trying to run away from us. He's trying to run towards us. And he's not trying to run towards us in judgment or condemnation. He's trying to run towards us out of passion and compassion for us. And it's a little hard to believe, especially if we grew up with that sense of dread or feeling, man, God is done with me, or he's through with me, or maybe the church might catch on fire if I walk in the building. If that's kind of your mentality, right, to hear these conversations might really change the way that you view who God is and kind of his heart for us. If you already kind of know and believe that God is a God who seeks, it's incredibly refreshing to see this again through fresh eyes and see the encounters of how Jesus pursues people, and then taking that and kind of being that as well for the people in our lives as we seek after others. So I want to dive into it a little today. We're going to be in the book of Mark. And so if you have a Bible with you, you want to open up to the book of Mark chapter 5, you can do that. You can open up your phone and go to YouVersion if you have the app and follow along there. If you don't have a Bible and you want one or need one, we would love to gift you with a Bible. There's one right underneath the chairs there right in front of you. So you can grab that, take that home with you if you want, use it today, follow along, and then make it yours. So here's what's happening in the book of Mark chapter 5. Jesus is actually on his way to go take care of and heal somebody else. Somebody else has put a request out, and he's on the way to go take care of somebody. On his way to go do that, he's interrupted. And he's interrupted by this massive group of people, and then we find this unique story of how Jesus is going to interact uniquely with a lady that is in pursuit of him. And here's where the story starts. Chapter 5 of Mark, verse 24. Here's what Mark tells us, right? A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. It says, yet instead of getting better, she actually grew worse. When she'd heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Okay, loaded story here. Let me kind of walk back through it and give you a little bit of context. So at this point in the ministry, the word had begun to get out that Jesus could heal people, right? If you can imagine that, like even if that happened today and people found out I have an ailment or a sickness, I go to Jesus and an interaction with him could leave me completely altered, healed, right? So now all these crowds of people are beginning to move towards Christ, and they're trying to kind of get a piece of him and get healing from him. And they're pressing in on him. It's becoming overwhelming. Mark tells us that there's this lady who has this illness, and this illness of this disease of bleeding, essentially, she would have, because of Jewish law, she would have been completely affected in every area of her life because of this sickness. Here's what I mean. In Jewish law, somebody who has this condition would be considered unclean. And in the Jewish society, what that means is if you were unclean, you weren't allowed to participate in group functions and in festivities and activities and be around people. You weren't allowed to touch people, right? So you couldn't go up and give somebody a hug or interact with them. This woman has been in this situation where she is perpetually unclean for 12 years. 12 years. So not only is her body affected, of course, that's awful in its own regard, but also every interaction and every relationship that she has, there's distance in. She is now on the outskirts, and everybody who knows her, they couldn't help it. They would have to think, I need to steer clear of her, because if I get too close to her, I'm going to become unclean as well. So just the very nature that she has this would cause her to be perpetually excluded, always on the outside, always seen as kind of a plague, right? You guys remember the COVID days when you get COVID and you're like, I am now a plague, right? I am a human disease. I can't go around anybody. That's how it felt for a minute, right? She would have perpetually lived in that experience of I've got to be away from everybody. I can't get close. When there's a family gathering like many of us are going to have today around Mother's Day, she can't come. Right? When there's a religious festival, and this is a communal society, so when people are gathered, they're having a blast, she's out. She's physically suffering, she's socially suffering. The story tells us that she spent everything that she had. She did everything that she knew how to do. She went to the doctors. She went to the people that she thought could help her. She's like out of resources. She's out of options. And says not only did she not get better, she actually got worse. This is the picture of desperation. She's at a moment when she's at the end. There's no more option on the table to draw from. There's nowhere else to go for hope. This is a woman who is desperate. And in her desperation, certainly she would have at some point heard about Jesus, right? As she's on the outskirts of community, she probably would have watched these crowds form around Christ and heard the stories of him healing. And she would have looked and said, I might be able to find help from him. Maybe I could find what I haven't been able to find anywhere else. And this is the mentality in which she approaches Jesus. She looks and she says, if it's possible, right? If it's possible, maybe Jesus could heal me. It's the sweetest hairdo ever, right? This poor woman had a lot of problems. This is now one of them, right? So she's looking and she's saying, hey, maybe Jesus can help me, right? I am desperate. I am desperate. I'm out of options. I'm out of money. I don't really have anybody that can come into my corner and be a support to me. Everybody has to have distance from me legally. It's not even like if they wanted to, they could go give her a hug or be close, hold her hand, right? Be a friend or a support, or she's unclean. Can Jesus help? Can he meet me in my moment of desperation? That's the question. Guys, I wonder if you've ever been in a moment of desperation like this. You know how it feels. Lori and I have got 4 kids now, 5 kids. I just added one, right? We've got 4 kids. That is not a slip, by the way. We are not pregnant. Rumors. This is how rumors start. We have 4 children, for the record. Right? We have 4 kids, but for a long time, we weren't able to get pregnant. All right? In the beginning, we were really struggling with infertility for a period of years, actually. And I remember when we started, and we were like, okay, well, we're gonna try to have kids and see what happens, and you kind of just assume it's going to work. You know, and then the months would pass, and month after month after month, it would be bad news and more bad news. And then it would get more anxious, and then it wouldn't happen some more. And eventually you go to a doctor, and nothing changes. And you read a book, or try a thing, nothing changes. A year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by. Right? And I remember looking at my bride. I'm a young husband, trying to figure out how to be a husband, and trying to figure out how to be supportive in these moments. And I'm just looking at my wife, and she is desperate. She's desperate. She's in tears. She's crying out to God for this, right? Please, I just want to be a mom. What a pure and beautiful desire. And I remember thinking, God, what do I do? I don't know. I remember being in tears, feeling helpless, which is one of the worst feelings as a man. I don't know how to help here. I don't know what to do. And I remember just crying out to the Lord, asking him to move. I'm desperate. I'm out of options. I did what I know how to do. Will you please help me? You've probably been there. Maybe some of you guys, maybe some of you you're there now. And when there's a moment like this, a moment of desperation, when the relationship has so much tension in it, and I don't know if we can fix it. Right? When there's brokenness between me and the family, or our marriage is broken, or our relationship with our kids is broken, or maybe it's a physical thing and it's overwhelming me and I'm sick, or somebody I love is sick. Maybe it's financial and there's stress around my job and how am I going to provide. When you're in that moment of desperation, you know how it feels? You go to bed with it every night. It's on your mind. And you wake up every morning and it's still there. And it's a pressure and it's a stress and it's an anxiety and it's is this how it's always going to be? This poor woman, she's in the thick of that. And she's been there for 12 years straight. Maybe this is just my life. No. What she does, what she concludes is inspiring and mind-boggling. Here's what she, rather than running away and giving up and losing hope, she says to herself, if I can go to Jesus, if I could get close to him, somehow she was able to get a glimpse of him and hear enough about him to know that if she got close to him and if she just touched his clothes, the scripture says, that she would be healed. I want you to understand what's going on here in this story. For that woman to do that, she would have had to get close to people and risk them becoming unclean. Did they know? Did they not know? We don't know. The story doesn't tell us. It says that there's large clouds, that there's people all around him, surrounding him. How did she even get to him? She would have had to risk being rejected, even being physically harmed by getting other people unclean, and then she's going to reach out and she's going to touch Jesus and potentially get him unclean. All of this for the potential of this pain going away, the desperation ceasing, right? Her help in her time of need. This was a desperate moment, and it's a desperate act that she leans out towards Christ, kind of risking it all. Here's what happens. Mark tells us as the story unfolds here in 5:29, it says, immediately her bleeding stopped. She felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. In the middle of the desperation, she's healed. Help came. The miraculous happened. Right? She would have known in that moment, she felt it. I found what I was looking for. I found the help that was needed. I took the long shot and it worked. And what's mind-blowing is this is what God has the ability to do. Does he always do that? Does he always, in the middle of our desperation, bring relief when we're looking for help? No. Sometimes in the middle of our desperation, we come to God, he gives us the abilities to sustain, the grace for the moment, enough to get through it, a friend, a help, a truth, a perspective to make it through a difficult trial or a difficult season. Sometimes what he'll do is a supernatural event where he brings the healing and the power into that moment, and it's nothing but a gift. She got one of those. She got one of those. As that happened to her, I'm not sure she would be able to do all the math of what that would mean in her life. This is a woman who has walked in perpetual shame of being unclean, of being rejected. She perpetually would have been right on the outside of it. Now she's not. Now she has made better, and I want us to see what happens from here. It's fascinating. It says this in 5:30. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Okay, so this is interesting. It's her faith. We're going to find out later in the story. It's her faith as she moves towards Jesus that helps trigger this healing event in her life. And Jesus looks and says, "Hey, I just healed somebody. Who did I heal?" He's looking around. Who touched me? The disciples ask a fair question. Watch what they say. Right? It says, you see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask, "Who touched me?" I love this. It's one of those moments in the Bible where the disciples are like, I have no idea what's going on. Jesus is surrounded by, there's literally people everywhere. And then you can just imagine Jesus stops and he's like, "Who touched me?" The disciples are like, Jesus has lost it. Right? Jesus, everybody's touching you, right? Literally, all of these people are trying to get a piece. They're literally touching you left and right. You're looking for one person who touched you. What are you even talking about? Jesus responds and he says, "Wait a minute, who touched me?" And he knows that something has happened. And here's what's interesting. Right? He's the Son of God. He's God himself. He knows what's going on. He has a decision to make. He has a decision to make. Someone just touched him who is unclean. They just broke a law. They just did what should not have been done. This woman made Jesus unclean, or at least that's how it would have played out if she wasn't healed, all by this approach to go and touch his clothes. And he could look at her and say, "I'm going to exact justice on you. I'm going to throw you away. I'm going to put the full measure of the law. I'm going to scorn you. You're a woman, by the way," which in this culture and time, a woman should not be interacting with a teacher, especially not an unclean woman. Women were viewed differently in this time. And yet Jesus he's looking for this woman. "Who touched me?" Here's how the story continues. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Mark doesn't give us all the details, but we can fill some of it in. From the moment that this woman's healed, somehow she disappears. Her instinct, her chronic response over the last 12 years and maybe even earlier, who knows the rest of her story, was to run away. Out of fear, out of shame. She knew what she risked by taking this step. And her instinct, rather than to stay and to be seen and to be known, her instinct was to run to the outskirts. Here's what I want us to see. Here's what I want us to see. Jesus, he was willing to meet her in her desperation. He was willing to bring the help. I hear you. I hear your cry for help. I know you're alone. I know you're afraid. I know you're desperate. I see your faith. I want to meet you in the middle of it. And hear me. He would view you and I that way. He would look at us and say, I know you're afraid. I know you're scared about the future. I know that you have needs. I know you have a thing you're in the middle of solving. I know you go to bed at night with this on your mind. I want to meet you in that, and I want to bring help. Whether that help is sustaining and bringing peace in the middle of a difficult situation, or maybe it's the supernatural. He's still able to do that, right? And anything in between. He would look and say, I want to bring that help, just like he brought help here. But he doesn't stop here. This is the key. This woman, just like you and I, when we're in trouble, when she was in trouble, her instinct is, I got to go get some help, and I'm going to go find it somewhere. He looks and says, yes, I'll do that. But I want more than just to help you and just to bring relief to your situation or your problem. He looks and says, I want relationship with you. I actually want to know you. I don't care who's rejected you. I don't care what your life has been like. I don't care what you're afraid of. I don't care who you've been and what you've done. I am seeking you and moving towards you in the middle of all of it. And this woman who had forgotten how to be loved, in her shame and her rejection, the instant she's healed, she jets. Because it's unfathomable that someone could love me if they really knew me. Guys, and this is where, if we're honest, this is where we can get. If can God help me? I'm going to run to him when I'm in trouble and find some help. But when he runs back to me, when I find out that he's a God who's seeking, he's after relationship with me. He actually wants to know me in all of my fear, in all of my shame, even in all of my sin, all of the ugly. He's saying, yep, I actually know it all. I know you, and I'm moving towards you, and I'm making a decision to, in spite of all that, to love you. You are fully known, and you are fully loved, and I am pressing in towards you in a relationship. The God who could have condemned and could have disregarded and could have scorned and could have rejected looked and said, daughter. Guys, we're like this woman. Moms, some of you right now are in the middle of feeling extraordinary fatigue. So some of you right now, a bunch of moms got a bunch of little babies. A bunch of moms have big, huge people. Right? Like I have humans that are massive now. How did you get this big? My son is 6'4". Like you giant, right? Listen to me, right? So some of us are in the middle of parenting. And we're exhausted. So some are sleep deprived. And some are out of answers. I don't know how to win in this relationship, and I don't know how to bring help, and the tears flow and the questions come and we wonder, moms especially, am I doing a good enough job? Did I give it my all? Is it okay? Will they be okay? Does anybody see? Does anybody know? Can anybody help me? And I want you to know that Jesus will meet us in the middle of that. And then he moves here. And he looks and says, I know all that, and I actually know the rest too. I know all of your fear and all of your shame. That you start to believe that you're unclean. And you feel the rejection. That this group of people disapproves of how you live. That side hates how you do it. And people would look at you and say, I'm done with you. I don't want you. I've known something about you, so now I'm going to get rid of you. And he would say, listen, I'm not like that. I know the worst thing about you, and I have chosen to pursue you. I've chosen to seek you. And guys, I don't know what to do with this. It doesn't totally make sense, okay? I was in a conversation this week about it. And I mentioned to you that, I didn't grow up in church, and if we're just getting to know each other, you'll hear pieces of my story along the way. I came to know Jesus in college, and before I knew Christ especially, I hurt many people in pretty significant ways in relationships. In ways that I'm not proud of and I can't celebrate. And I'm very aware of the reality of the harm that was done. And a person who knows some of my story asked me the question, it was actually very sobering. They essentially asked me, Ryan, how do you live with that? How do you live with the fact that you know you hurt people really badly and there's like nothing you can really do to change it? And I said, it comes up. Sometimes it fires up and gets me. I said, but the reality is this. The only thing I can do to make any sense of it is this. I know that someone has seen the worst things about me. All of my ugly thoughts and all of my selfish motivations and all of the people that I've hurt and all of the ways that I have disregarded God and have been harmful to others. He knows every single bit of that, and yet he has chosen to forgive and to accept me completely in spite of me. So that's it, man. That's all I got. I can't pay for what I did. Jesus paid for it. I can make peace with people and try to do my best, but at the end of the day, I rise and fall to a God who seeks. A God who knows, and a God who's chosen to accept and to love. See, like me, this woman had an interaction that would change her forever. This is what God was doing when he sent Jesus. Is he's looking at you and me. And he says, I'm moving toward you. I want to bring you help. More than that, I want to move toward you in the ugly, in the secret, in the broken. I know all of it. I know what happened, and I know what you did. And I'm still in. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to forgive you. And here's all he really wants. Like this woman. that we might swing back around. And rather than run away in fear and shame and trying to pay our own way, that we might look, it's just one little step. That we might meet him in relationship. Right? That we could gather with him in relationship and bring who we are to bear, and we could let ourselves be found, and we could let ourselves be known. This is what the whole thing's about. It's not about being a cleaned up, perfect person, a faking it facade. Here's the good, bad, and the ugly, Jesus. If you really want to know me, I'll let myself be found. So for those of us who are here seeking after help, can we also be here? It's great to be in need and to be desperate and to bring that to God. And it's that person often that Jesus is like, hey, I'm looking for you. In fact, this may be the catalyst that draws us together. Is it possible that the difficulty that you are in the thick of right now is the thing that connects your heart back to God's and changes your path forever? Where not only relief may be found, or help may be found, not only healing for the thing that we're in, but healing for the shame and the fear and the rejection and the hiding. This is what Jesus is trying to do. He's trying to love you. He's trying to love me. Because our God is a God of justice and of truth. And he decided to pay my way, and he would prove it ultimately on that cross. So made it all work. If you're here today and you're in need of help and you're open to a relationship, I want you to know you can find it. I want you to know that what Jesus would do after this story, he would go and he would finish what he came to do. He would give himself up on a cross, and he would pay for what he knows about you and me, for the imperfect parts. And that's the way that he shows his love. He says, I'll stand in your place, I'll take the punishment, and what I'll do is I'll invite you into relationship, and I want you to believe in me. I want you to have faith in me. If you've never made that decision, you can make that today. No matter what your background or what your story, you can look and say, Jesus, I'm in. With trembling and fear, you can tell him the truth. That's what the woman did. Here's my story, Lord. Will you forgive me? I'm in. Know me. Find me. You can do that for the first time, or you can do that for the first time in a while. First time in a long time. Let yourself be found today. See my heart, see my life. Forgive me, accept me. Let me be yours today. As the band comes up, would you bow your heads and close your eyes? We sing and worship together. Lord, we don't understand all the things that happen in our lives. God, the difficult and the desperate and how you choose to answer all those. I don't understand it all. But we're choosing to believe that you want to meet us in the middle of our call for help, the middle of the desperate moments, the fatigue and the worry and the anxiety and the pain, the rejection. And Lord, you don't want to just bring help there. You want the rest of it. The failure and the fear and the shame. And Lord, you want to take it all and know us in the middle of all of it. God, I pray today for myself and for each and every one of us that you would help us to believe that. You are a God who is seeking us right now, as we are. And today, Lord, we want to let you find us. As messy and broken, disturbing as we are. Here we are, God. Meet us in the middle of all of it. We put our faith, our trust in you, even now.